The laws for migrating to Kuwait have changed and developed in response to the migrant patterns that occurred. The workforce was overpopulated with migrants. In 1975, it was estimated that 80% of the workforce consisted of non-Kuwaitis. Between 1959 and 1964, the government closely monitored migrations entering, departing, and gaining employment in the country. However, migrating to Kuwait was considered fairly free. By 1965, native Kuwaitis made up 47% of the population, and the government responded to this by changing the laws. There were tighter restrictions for who came, left, and was employed. By 1969, the law included penalties for illegal immigrants. There was greater security threat through the Arab-Israeli War. In 1978 to 79, the law was adjusted again to ensure a growing labour market. This was done in various ways, for example, creating policies that extend residency from 2 years to 5 and creating a minimum 1-year period at one employer. In 1980, there were concerns over cultural security in Kuwait. In March 1990, Kuwait made a long-term plan to make native Kuwaitis 40% of the population by 2015, through ways like limiting migration and making employment more accessible to them. A study by the Paisley College of Technology in the United Kingdom concluded that prioritising native Kuwaitis in the labour markets was discriminating against the immigrants. These restrictions have resulted in a segmented labour market within which the earnings differential between the natives and the immigrants is fairly wide. Discrimination in favour of natives, with its unfavourable impact on the allocation of labour and skills, explains a considerable part of this differential. Immigrants are brought to the country to fill jobs which locals are either untrained for or anxious to avoid and stimulate the domestic economy activity. The study concluded that for the reason, in combination with decreasing oil resources, will gradually lower the need for migration labour. There was a large percentage of Nepalese immigrants in Kuwait, in particular domestic workers in need of urgent money to support their families. In the 1990s, there had been a rapid reduction in the demand for carpet workers and the locals were seeking work in other fields. However, as there wasn't much demand for workers in Nepal, many migrated across borders to gain employment. However, a number of Nepalese women migrated to Kuwait illegally, many filling positions in domestic work in financial need to support their families. Human trafficking became a common issue in Kuwait. Kuwait had a system where the government distributed working visas to businesses to employ labourers from Asia. However, these visas were often illegally sold and it became common practice to employ migrants through illegal visas. This often resulted in a lack of rights for the immigrant, as they could not receive the support from the government or embassy as they were. Iraq invaded Kuwait on the 2nd of August 1990 because Saddam Hussein accused Kuwait of underpricing their oil. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, 48 different countries were represented in its migrant population. It was estimated that 60%, about 1 million, of the Kuwait population fled the country because of the Iraqi invasion. These people who emigrated from Kuwait were often pulled to countries like Jordan, Yemen, and Sudan. The Jordan population rose by 10% during this time. The Gulf War created many push factors for emigration in Kuwait. The economy was severely damaged from the disruption in the oil market and the destruction from the war. The Iraq invasion changed the views of Kuwait government until today. The government created very tight restrictions for immigrants who originated from countries that sided with Iraq during the war, for example Jordan and Palestine. Furthermore, the Kuwait government put a strong importance on Kuwaiti nationalism. This included favouring temporary rather than permanent migrants. They also changed the migration laws again to closely monitor the origins of the migrants and how long they stayed for, as migrants could only gain a work permit if they were hired by a Gulf Cooperation Council. However, they are still struggling with migrant workers today. In March 2013, the Kuwaiti government vowed to cut 100,000 migrant workers each year. Authorities believe there are so many foreign labourers because they migrate here under unfulfilled promises of employment. Under government regulations, companies can request a certain amount of migrant workers. However, companies often import as many as they are allowed and only give work to some. As a new part of the 2010 labour law, there have been inspections of companies to make sure this doesn't happen.